Imagine a crisp autumn evening in Toronto, sometime in the near future. The skyline, once a vibrant tapestry of innovation and aspiration, now feels like a monument to an era that slipped away. You walk past rows of gleaming glass towers, monuments to capital, yet the streets below reveal a different truth. A young couple, their faces etched with a weariness beyond their years, huddle inside a small, dimly lit apartment, the rent sign outside their building already advertising another dizzying increase. Their dreams of a backyard, a quiet street, a place to call their own, feel as distant as the stars overhead. They remember their parents' stories. A time when a steady job and diligent saving unlocked the door to stability, when the promise of a better tomorrow was not a luxury, but a given. Now, that memory feels like a cruel joke, a faded photograph of a world that no longer exists. The air itself seems to carry the weight of lost futures, a silent lament for what was and what could have been. This isn't fiction. It's consequence. You are about to witness the unraveling of a profound economic illusion, a story not of a cyclical downturn, but of a deliberate, structural transformation. This isn't just about rising home prices in one nation, it's about how an entire country, Canada, inadvertently built its prosperity on the most precarious of foundations, real estate. We will dissect how seemingly rational decisions, made in the pursuit of stability, slowly, imperceptibly, warped its economic DNA, turning housing from a basic need into the singular engine of its growth. What you're about to uncover will challenge every assumption about success and security. Few dare to speak this truth openly because the implications are deeply uncomfortable, touching the very core of national identity and the perceived wealth of millions. Prepare to see how a dream, meticulously constructed, became a gilded cage threatening to stifle innovation, deepen inequality, and ultimately risk a profound societal reckoning. To truly grasp the magnitude of this shift, you must first remember the world that once was, a recent past where the economic bedrock felt solid. After the 2008 financial crisis, Canada emerged with an air of exceptionalism, a nation seemingly immune to the deepest tremors. Its economy, driven by diverse industries and resource wealth, offered a clear path for its citizens. Home ownership wasn't a distant fantasy. It was an achievable milestone, a cornerstone of the middle-class dream. For countless families, like the Chens, buying a home was the natural culmination of hard work, a tangible reward for saving diligently and contributing to society. It represented stability, a place to raise children, and a modest yet reliable store of wealth. This system promised that if you played by the rules, if you invested in your education and career, a secure future was yours. Housing was a vital part of this ecosystem, but it was a part, not the entire forest. Now, meet Liam Chen, a 32-year-old software engineer, the kind of person you likely know, perhaps even yourself. Liam embodies that fundamental promise. He wakes each morning in his modest Toronto apartment, the city's hum a constant backdrop to his ambition. He works at a promising tech startup, his mind sharp, his code elegant, contributing to a sector celebrated for its innovation. His parents, second-generation immigrants, meticulously taught him the values of diligence, education, and responsible saving, the very blueprint for success they followed. Liam believed in meritocracy, in the idea that hard work combined with smart choices would naturally lead to a secure, stable future, including the bedrock of homeownership. He pictured himself, just like his parents, eventually owning a place, building equity, providing for a family. This was not just a personal dream, it was the implicit social contract, a future he felt he was diligently earning. But beneath this veneer of stability, a subtle yet profound shift was already underway. The first fracture in the system wasn't a sudden crash, but a series of deliberate choices made with the best intentions. Following the 2008 crisis, the Bank of Canada, alongside governments, began to pump liquidity into the economy. Their decision to maintain historically low interest rates and introduce various fiscal incentives seemed entirely rational. The goal was clear: stimulate recovery, restore consumer confidence, and shore up the perceived strength of the Canadian financial system. Housing, with its immediate economic ripple effects, appeared to be a reliable lever. At that moment, it felt like the correct, even necessary path. Yet, hidden within this strategy was an invisible error, a silent poison entering the economic bloodstream. It was the tacit, almost imperceptible acceptance of housing not as a component of the economy, but as its primary, indispensable engine. The initial effect was deceptively positive. As the Bank of Canada maintained historically low interest rates post-2008, a wave of cheap credit swept the nation. Mortgages became astonishingly affordable, instantly boosting borrowing power for everyone, from first-time buyers planting roots to seasoned investors seeking new wealth avenues. The construction sector boomed, cranes dotting city skylines, a testament to vibrant growth. But this immediate stimulant had an insidious accumulated effect. Housing demand surged, not just steadily, but with an accelerating gravitational pull, driving prices relentlessly upwards across every market. Household debt, once manageable, began a relentless, quiet climb. Existing homeowners, like Liam's parents, watched their property values soar, feeling wealthier, more secure. They even encouraged their son, "Liam, you need to get in now before it's too late." Real estate, suddenly, was the most attractive investment in the entire country. You see, those initial low rates were just the beginning. Governments, both federal and provincial, doubled down, introducing a cascade of policies that seemed, on the surface, entirely sensible. First-time homebuyer incentives proliferated, designed to help aspiring homeowners like Liam step onto the property ladder. Immigration targets, vital for national growth, remained high, ensuring a steady influx of new residents who would, naturally, need places to live. These were not malicious schemes. They were deliberate efforts to sustain economic momentum and ensure Canada remained an attractive destination. Yet, critically, these demand-side stimuli were rarely, if ever, matched by a corresponding aggressive strategy to boost housing supply. The complex web of municipal zoning restrictions and glacial permitting processes remained largely untouched, creating an artificial scarcity that would soon prove devastating. This imbalance created a silent, yet seismic, shift. While demand soared, fueled by readily available credit and well-intentioned government programs, the actual supply of new homes, especially in the vibrant urban cores that attracted talent like Liam, struggled to keep pace. You might imagine a bustling marketplace, but instead, picture a single, narrow gate through which everyone must pass. This artificial scarcity didn't just push prices up, it supercharged them, igniting a speculative frenzy that defied all historical norms. Housing wasn't just appreciating, it was accelerating, becoming the singular, overwhelming topic dominating dinner conversations, news cycles, and even political debates. For Liam, this meant his diligently saved down payment, once a beacon of hope, began to shrink in relative value, eroding his confidence. As home values soared, a far more insidious transformation took hold within Canada's economic engine. Capital, which in a balanced, diversified economy would naturally flow into research and development, into cutting-edge manufacturing, or into innovative tech startups like Liam's, began to reroute. It wasn't a conscious directive, but an irresistible pull. Why invest in the uncertain, often slow returns of a new invention when the returns from real estate were so immediate, so reliable, and seemingly endless? This wasn't a conspiracy. It was the logical, albeit destructive response to deeply skewed incentives. Money chased the easiest, fastest gains, and in Canada, that path led overwhelmingly to property. The nation was inadvertently making a long-term bet, funneling its lifeblood into a single, increasingly speculative sector. The immediate consequence was an invisible drain on the nation's future. Investment in truly innovative, high-growth industries began to lag, starved of the capital that was now chasing bricks and mortar. This wasn't just an abstract economic indicator. It directly impacted individuals. Wage growth for those in non-housing related sectors, like Liam's tech field, stagnated, failing to keep pace with the cost of living, let alone the escalating price of housing. Over time, Canada's economic diversity, once a source of strength, began to shrink, and its productivity growth fell behind many of its international peers. Liam's startup, for instance, found securing growth capital a constant uphill battle, while real estate ventures seemed to attract financing effortlessly. He saw his peers in other countries doing similar work, achieving far greater financial stability. This isn't just about statistics. It's about the deep human impact of seemingly rational choices made years ago. If you find yourself grappling with these realities, or want to understand how such profound consequences unfold, subscribe and stay with us. Your insights and reflections are vital for dissecting these complex forces. This widening chasm between his diligent efforts and the elusive dream of homeownership ignited a profound internal conflict within Liam. He had meticulously followed the blueprint for success, pursued higher education, secured a well-paying job in a growth sector, and saved responsibly, believing these actions would guarantee him the same stability his parents enjoyed. Yet, each new listing, each disheartening conversation with a real estate agent served as a crushing realization. Despite doing everything right, the housing market had rendered his painstaking efforts insufficient, pushing the dream of a stable home, a place to build a family, further and further out of reach. The rules he lived by seemed to have changed without warning, leaving him adrift. This wasn't mere disappointment. It was a gnawing sense of structural betrayal. Liam watched his hard-earned capital, his meticulously built savings, devalued against an ever-inflating asset class that seemed to operate by different rules. The fundamental promise of meritocracy, that hard work and smart choices would lead to tangible rewards, felt shattered. The system he was taught to trust no longer seemed to reward diligent effort or professional success, but rather inherited wealth, speculative risk, or simply being in the right place at the right time. His future expectations, once so clear and achievable, now clashed violently with the present reality where his professional accomplishments were relentlessly outpaced by the economics of housing, leaving him frustrated and increasingly disillusioned. The problem, Liam slowly began to grasp, was not an isolated market fluctuation or a temporary setback. This was systemic. The very definition of housing had subtly yet fundamentally changed. It was no longer primarily a basic necessity, a place to live, but had been actively transformed into an investment commodity, a primary vehicle for wealth accumulation. This transformation meant that the system, once designed to foster middle-class prosperity through accessible home ownership, was now actively failing to deliver on that core promise for an entire generation. The implicit social contract, the idea that a good life was within reach for those who worked for it, was breaking down, leaving many like Liam feeling increasingly marginalized in their own country. The tension was palpable, not just in Liam's personal struggle, but rippling through society. You could sense it in the increasingly desperate conversations about rent, in the delayed milestones of young families, and in the growing cynicism about the future. The initial, seemingly rational decisions that prioritized housing as an economic engine had, over time, created hidden dependencies and long-term bets that were now coming due. The erosion of the system was no longer invisible. It was manifesting in the daily lives of millions. The belief that everything was under control, that the market would self-correct, was beginning to crack, revealing a profound structural flaw where the very foundation of Canadian prosperity was becoming its most precarious vulnerability. The chasm widened, and housing prices, once tethered to local incomes, began to float free, disconnected from the very wages that were supposed to sustain them. You witnessed households desperate to either enter or remain in the market, leveraging themselves to unprecedented levels, often through multiple mortgages or complex lines of credit. This wasn't a choice born of avarice, but of necessity. Young professionals like Liam, despite their high-value skills and promising careers, found themselves systematically priced out of major urban centers. Home ownership, once a symbol of attainable middle-class stability, was rapidly transforming into an exclusive domain, a privilege increasingly reliant on inherited wealth or the sheer luck of an early market entry, rather than diligent effort. This immediate, stark reality began to reshape the very fabric of urban life, pushing the dream further away for those who needed it most. The accumulated effect was a national household debt soaring to record highs, a precarious mountain built upon the shifting sands of housing values. This made the entire Canadian economy acutely sensitive to even the slightest tremor in interest rates, turning every central bank decision into a high-stakes gamble. Rental markets, once a temporary stepping stone, became hyper-competitive battlegrounds, with prices escalating so rapidly they often outpaced mortgage payments in smaller cities, trapping generations in a cycle of perpetual rent. Social and geographical mobility, once hallmarks of a dynamic economy, sharply declined. You saw families unable to move for better job opportunities, tethered by housing costs, or forced into longer commutes, sacrificing time, energy, and quality of life. The system, once promising movement, now cemented stasis. For Liam, the impact was profound, a slow-burning realization that his carefully constructed future was collapsing. He began to seriously consider options that, just a few years prior, would have seemed unthinkable. Emigration to a country with a more balanced housing market, or a significant career shift to a much smaller, less economically vibrant Canadian city, abandoning his hard-won professional trajectory in Toronto. These became genuine, agonizing considerations. The city he loved, the tech sector he had poured his passion into, now felt like a gilded cage. He was trapped, not by his choices, but by the relentless structural forces of a market that had fundamentally redefined success. The promise of meritocracy, the very bedrock of his upbringing, had been replaced by an unforgiving calculus of asset inflation. This wasn't merely a personal financial struggle, it was a gnawing sense of structural betrayal. Liam watched his hard-earned capital, his meticulously built savings, devalued against an ever-inflating asset class that seemed to operate by entirely different rules. The fundamental promise of meritocracy, that diligent work and smart choices would lead to tangible rewards, felt shattered. The system he was taught to trust no longer rewarded professional excellence or responsible saving. Instead, it privileged inherited wealth, speculative risk-taking, or simply the fortune of an early market entry. His future expectations, once clear and within reach, now clashed violently with a present reality where his professional accomplishments were relentlessly outpaced by housing economics, leaving him deeply frustrated and profoundly disillusioned with his chosen path. The problem, you see, was not a singular villain, but a confluence of interconnected structural forces. The Bank of Canada's sustained low interest rates, while meant to stimulate, relentlessly fueled housing demand. Provincial and municipal zoning restrictions often outdated, severely limited supply, particularly in desirable urban centers. A federal tax system preferentially treated housing as an investment vehicle via exemptions like the principal residence, subtly encouraging speculation over productive business investment. Aggressive mortgage lending and financial institutions' reliance on expanding mortgage portfolios further inflated the bubble. And behind it all, political elites, fearing electoral backlash from homeowners, prioritized maintaining housing values, reinforced by powerful real estate lobbies. These were not malicious actors, but mechanisms locked in a destructive feedback loop, perpetuating demand-side stimulus without ever truly addressing the supply deficit. If you find yourself grappling with these realities, or want to understand how such profound consequences unfold, subscribe and stay with us. Your insights and reflections are vital for dissecting these complex forces. The critical turning point, the moment when the trajectory became irreversible, was not a sudden cataclysm, but a collective failure of policymakers and institutions, particularly around the mid-2010s. Even as undeniable warning signs multiplied, escalating debt, shrinking affordability, capital diversion, there was a steadfast resistance to implementing significant systemic interventions. This included avoiding substantial, sustained increases in interest rates that might cool the market, resisting aggressive taxation on speculative property, and failing to enact comprehensive land use reforms to genuinely boost supply. The path to a balanced economy was still, technically, open, but the inertia, the political expediency, and the pervasive fear of crashing the perceived wealth of a large homeowner electorate meant that these essential actions were simply not taken. This was the silent, yet deafening decision. Why this inaction? The answer lies in the deeply entrenched political economy of housing. Policymakers, acutely aware of the electoral backlash from a vast homeowner electorate whose wealth was tied to ever-increasing property values, prioritized short-term stability over long-term structural health. The pervasive fear of crashing the market became a paralyzing force, a self-imposed constraint that overshadowed economic prudence. This fear was meticulously amplified by powerful lobbying efforts from entrenched real estate and financial industries, whose business models thrived on the very market dynamics that were creating the crisis. The illusion of perpetual growth in housing values was too deeply entrenched in the national psyche, and the perceived short-term political cost of intervention seemed far too high to bear. So, nothing truly transformative was done. From this point forward, the opportunity to gently deflate the housing bubble and transition to a more diversified, productive economy was irrevocably lost. You might imagine a slow leak, allowing pressure to dissipate gradually. Instead, the system was locked into a trajectory where any future correction would be far more painful and destabilizing. The chance to strategically pivot fiscal and monetary policy away from housing as the primary economic engine had vanished. What could have been a managed rebalancing became an inevitable, harder landing. The nation had effectively painted itself into a corner, sacrificing future flexibility for present, albeit artificial, stability. The dream of a soft landing, a controlled descent back to economic fundamentals, became a phantom limb, a painful reminder of what could have been. The die was cast. The immediate consequence of this inaction was an economy that became hypersensitive to even minor interest rate changes. This severely limited the central bank's ability to fight inflation without risking a catastrophic housing collapse, a scenario that would wipe out vast swaths of perceived wealth and trigger a recession. Imagine a tightrope walker, forced to maintain an impossible balance. Simultaneously, the government's capacity to stimulate growth through fiscal policy became severely restricted. Any significant injection of funds risked reigniting the housing fire, pushing prices even higher and exacerbating the very problem it sought to solve. The tools of economic management, once versatile and robust, were now blunt instruments, rendered largely ineffective by the structural dependency on housing. This was the profound trade-off: short-term political comfort for long-term economic paralysis. The nation had traded genuine, diversified growth for the illusion of wealth generated by ever-inflating asset prices. This profound structural dependency meant that Canada's economic fate was now inextricably linked to the whims of its housing market. Every policy decision, every economic forecast, every household budget became a hostage to this singular, precarious anchor. The once diverse tapestry of Canadian industry, capable of weathering various economic storms, now found itself overshadowed by the colossal shadow of real estate. You were witnessing a country, once admired for its prudence, now locked into a high-stakes gamble where the only way to avoid immediate pain was to perpetuate a deeper, more insidious instability. The future, once a realm of open possibility, had become a narrow corridor, defined by the decisions not taken. You witness the concrete fallout. Major tech companies, once beacons of Canada's innovative promise, now openly report a crippling difficulty attracting and retaining skilled talent in its major urban centers. The reason is stark and singular: exorbitant housing costs. These aren't just anecdotes, they are strategic business decisions. Some of these firms, once committed to Canadian growth, are now actively expanding operations in more affordable global hubs, effectively exporting high-value jobs and intellectual capital. This exodus isn't a temporary blip. It's a direct consequence of an economic environment where the cost of living for skilled professionals has become unsustainable, draining the very talent pool essential for future prosperity. The nation's innovative engine is slowly being starved, not by a lack of ideas, but by an inability to house the minds that generate them. The data confirms this unsettling reality. National surveys and emigration reports paint a stark picture, revealing a significant, accelerating increase in young professionals, skilled tradespeople, and even established families leaving major Canadian urban centers, and often the country itself. They are not chasing adventure. They are in pursuit of basic housing affordability and career prospects that align with their efforts, something their home country can no longer reliably offer. Meanwhile, prestigious economic bodies like the OECD and IMF consistently highlight Canada's alarmingly high household debt-to-income ratios and its persistently lagging productivity growth. Their analyses show an economy increasingly concentrated in real estate and financial services, rather than diversifying into the manufacturing, technology, or innovation sectors critical for long-term, sustainable wealth. You can feel the economic squeeze in every household budget. Consumer spending patterns reveal a populace held hostage, highly sensitive to even minor interest rate increases, a clear indication of a debt-laden household sector teetering on the edge. This isn't just about big numbers, it's about the fabric of daily life. On a societal level, the rise of multi-generational households, once a cultural choice, is now a necessity, a desperate strategy to pool resources against insurmountable housing costs. Family formation is delayed, sometimes indefinitely, and individuals are forced into ever longer commutes, sacrificing precious time, energy, and quality of life. The Canadian dream, once a clear path to homeownership, has irrevocably morphed into a relentless struggle for basic shelter, a profound and visible shift in the national standard of living. This transformation hollows out the very dynamism of Canadian cities. Essential workers, nurses, teachers, firefighters, service staff are systematically priced out of the communities they serve, leading to acute labor shortages in critical sectors. The vibrant diversity that once defined these urban centers diminishes as only the highest earners, or those with inherited wealth, can afford to live there. This isn't just an economic imbalance, it's a decline in overall quality of life, a fracturing of social cohesion where the basic functions of a city begin to strain. The system, once promising a secure future, now delivers a stark, stratified present, where a roof over your head demands sacrifices that were once unthinkable, validating the thesis that this collapse was not accidental, but a logical, if tragic, progression. If you find yourself grappling with these realities, or want to understand how such profound consequences unfold, subscribe and stay with us. Your insights and reflections are vital for dissecting these complex forces. This channel is dedicated to unraveling these structural shifts, explaining their intricate connections, and preparing you for the next critical developments in a world that is constantly and sometimes brutally redefining itself. Join a community committed to understanding the true mechanics of our global economy, beyond the surface narratives. If the current trajectory continues, Canada faces profound and inevitable systemic consequences, far beyond mere economic cycles. A permanent economic and social divide will solidify, hardening the lines between property owners and non-owners, an unbridgeable chasm that deepens wealth inequality and irrevocably erodes social cohesion. Younger generations will continue to experience reduced mobility, their life milestones, marriage, children, career progression, delayed leading to a pervasive, diminished sense of opportunity. This structural immobility will inevitably accelerate the brain drain, as the most ambitious and talented seek opportunity elsewhere, creating long-term demographic challenges that will reshape the nation for decades to come, leaving a society fractured and increasingly stagnant. Globally, Canada risks losing its competitive edge as a hub for innovation and talent, a once proud identity that will slowly but surely fade into memory. Instead of leading in advanced value-added industries and intellectual capital, it will increasingly regress, becoming primarily a resource exporter and a speculative real estate market, a mere playground for global capital rather than a genuine creator of it. Its global economic and political influence will diminish in lockstep with its declining productive capacity and innovative drive, shrinking its voice on the world stage. The national focus, once directed towards ambitious projects and groundbreaking research, will inevitably shift to the precarious management of escalating debt and the volatile dance of asset prices, a perpetual state of defensiveness rather than proactive, confident growth. This structural trap will leave the national economy perpetually vulnerable to global financial shocks and interest rate fluctuations, unable to absorb blows that more diversified economies might withstand. Fiscal and monetary policy flexibility, once a cornerstone of prudent governance, will become severely limited, leaving policymakers with few tools to navigate future crises without exacerbating the existing dependency. This path inevitably leads to prolonged economic stagnation, a slow, grinding decline rather than a sudden collapse, but equally devastating. Socially, the implicit contract of hard work leading to prosperity will fracture beyond repair, and cities will become less diverse and dynamic as essential workers are permanently priced out, leading to endemic labor shortages in critical sectors and a pervasive decline in overall quality of life. This story is a stark, universal lesson in the perils of mistaking asset inflation for genuine economic growth, a cautionary tale that echoes far beyond Canada's borders. It reveals how a nation, in its relentless pursuit of perceived stability and wealth protection through real estate, can inadvertently construct a gilded cage, consuming its own vital foundations of productivity, innovation, and social equity. Canada's experience demonstrates unequivocally that enduring prosperity is built on what a society truly produces and innovates, on the value it creates, not merely on what its land is nominally worth. The illusion of an endless boom inevitably leads to a profound reckoning, proving that a system designed to protect wealth at all costs can ultimately undermine the very fabric of national well-being and leave entire generations adrift, searching for the promise that was lost.